with me being the age that I am, having lived all this goth and post-punk the first time, I'm really coming from that place. And Chris and Anthony are significantly younger, and they're kind of coming from a different place where they didn't grow up with the same music that I did. And so the combination becomes then what I consider to be something kind of unique, because it's not driven by one thing.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Edley ODowd.
And Mr. O'Dowd, how would people know you? What musical projects would they know you from?
Musical projects that people would know me from would be New York City's Toilet Boys and more internationally, Psychic TV with Genesis Briar P. Orridge.
And in addition to those two projects, those two bands, you also have a new project out called Scorpion Tea. Is that correct?
That's correct. Scorpion Tea, my brand new band with a debut album releasing on Friday, October 27th.
And on your own, you are also an experimental and noise artist.
Yes, I've been experimenting with sound for a while now, and particularly with some other work that I was doing with Genesis P. Orridge. It's kind of an interesting conundrum because when Genesis passed away, I was sort of like, well, what do I do now musically? And so the first thing was to revisit that sort of past and the stuff that Genesis had gotten me involved with, and produced a solo album called Forward that came out earlier this year on a couple of different streaming platforms and formats.
Now, from your work with the Toilet Boys to Psychic TV to Scorpion Tea to your own musical project, would you say that you dwell in any one area in terms of genre?
I don't, because for me, music, it's such a vast interest of mine and something that's been ongoing since I was very little. And so while I grew up with kind of stadium rock and things that a lot of kids are into today, which I find hilarious and interesting at the same time. But, growing up on that sort of thing and then discovering punk in my teens and late teens and kind of all of that melding together. I mean, if there was any genre that I had to say more specifically that I feel a part of, it would be rock, I guess. But yeah, I find it interesting to kind of play with different types of genres.
You mentioned stadium rock. What led you to want to pursue music, to want to play music?
If I was to be completely honest, I would say it was the rock band Kiss, because that was my fascination when I was really little. So I wanted to be like Peter Criss. I wanted to, wear cool costumes and play the drums, which kind of led to, just a general fascination. I mean, I got a drum kit, piece of crap drum kit. My mom found it at a garage sale for $50 when I was maybe like 11 or something, and sat down, put my headphones on with my Cheap Trick Live at Budokan record. And I was like, I don't sound like this at all. I sound terrible. And got disinterested. Put the drums in the garage until I was about 15, 16 and joined a hardcore punk band. And I'm like, now we're talking. Now I can play. So it became very, very much like a self-taught thing that, I just sort of learned by trial and error, by putting a floor tom and a snare next to each other, learning how to play like Maureen Tucker, though I didn't even know who she was at the time, to eventually bringing the bass drum closer, bringing the cymbals in and being like, okay, how do I do this? And just kind of taught myself over the years.
Now, why the drums? You said Peter Criss. Why not Gene Simmons or Ace Frehley?
Well, because I guess when I was of a certain age, we're talking kind of like the early 80s, my folks couldn't really afford, sort of like stringed instrument or anything like that. Drums, for me to say like join marching band at that time was maybe an $8 investment because I just needed a pair of sticks and a pad. And then the drum kit came for $50, So it was too lofty of a thing for me and my family's, income, to have something fancier than that.
Right. And I mean, once you got involved with punk and hardcore, I'm sure you discovered that without a drummer, there are no bands. And so you're probably in demand throughout your scene as far as like people needing a drummer, right?
Oh, everybody was always looking for a drummer. Yes, had some choices there, which was great. I mean, the only regret that I have is that I do wish as a youth that I had learned, piano or something like that, just to have those basics, because I've had to learn those as an adult.
You mentioned your time with Psychic TV. What was your interest in the band and Genesis George's music before you joined? What was it that drew you to them?
Well, I had heard Dreams Less Sweet when I was a teenager through a friend of mine in high school, and I thought the album was really, really, really interesting. I didn't understand it. It was my brain was still too much in rock mode at that point. So I was like, I don't understand how these things fit together. And what's this weird non-microphone that's being carried around and being buried in coffins? And it just was like a little bit scary. But I've always been drawn to things that frighten me a little bit. I grew up with big fascination with monsters and larger than life characters and all that sort of thing. And so Genesis became this kind of mystery to me because pre-internet growing up, right, with like there was really not very much information about anything. So with Genesis, yeah, I could go get a copy of research and be freaked out by all these piercings and all that kind of stuff, but there wasn't much beyond that. And so years later, when I ended up meeting Genesis, it was like, wow, you're a person, you know, you're not this scary thing that I had imagined in my head for all these years, you know? So that's kind of where the interest in Psychic TV came initially, because Genesis and I were friends before we ever played music together. We were actually friends for several years before we did anything. We just really enjoyed each other's company, which kind of made the band thing a lot easier to do because we were already established as friends. So that relationship existed. And you know, Psychic TV was really, our goal was to do one show. I really wanted to prove to Genesis that at that time in the early 2000s, that there was still a huge amount of people out there that wanted to hear those songs. And Genesis kept saying, no, I don't really believe that, you know, like, how can that be true? And I was like, I'm asking you to trust me. Take a leap of faith and trust me, and let me put together a band and we'll do one show and I'll show you. And sure enough, that show came. We rehearsed for months for it. I put together this great band, and we only advertised by physical flyers at that time to focus. So yeah, I was really looking to sort of prove to Genesis that there, you know, people were still interested in the music of Psychic TV because, you know, Genesis just felt that they had, you know, moved on from that, and that people, you know, wouldn't necessarily be interested. Oh, who wants to hear Roman P and, you know, Godstar? And I was like, trust me, a lot of people do. And because we had established ourselves as friends and close friends at that, the trust was there for Genesis to allow me to put together a band pretty much sight unseen. And said, why don't you come on in and see what we've got, you know? And so that gig took the form of a gig that was only advertised by flyers because this was the advent of MySpace. We still didn't have like the social media networks that we have now. And huge, huge snowstorm fallen on New York City on that day in 2002, I guess it was. And we just thought, oh no, like all this effort, all this work, and now the show's not even going to happen. Took us 4 hours to get to the venue in Manhattan from Queens, which should be really just not more than a 45-minute drive. And as we're rolling up and trying to get through all this snow, we see 500 people under umbrellas lined up around the corner to get into this tiny little place. And we were like, wow. So that really set the stage. And from there, I mean, the next morning, the phone was ringing, and, you know, gave Genesis a couple of days to relax, and then called and said, hey, I'm getting a lot of calls from publicists and booking agents, and they all want us to do something. Like, what do you think? And we just, neither one of us really expected that to happen. And we decided to go with it, and we didn't stop for almost 20 years.
That's great. I mean, just as an aside, I came to this music in the 90s. And even though I was more of a metal guy, Throbbing Gristle and Psychic TV were still names that were, you know, mentioned in this very reverential light. So I think it's interesting that, he, you know, to some extent he didn't realize the influence he had, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. I think Genesis always knew in terms of Throbbing Gristle, right? Like the sort of how iconic, right? And how important and influential. I think Jen was very aware of that. I think because Psychic TV was more of Jen's heart, it was a little more like, oh, there's a lot of weird memories and we had a good time, but there was just different things that kind of happened where, Jen just didn't see it as valid, I guess, in a way, until we got back out there, with the project and people were accepting Genesis's new blurred gender and wanting to hear new and wanting to hear old. And there was just this demand that got created. So we found out pretty quickly. And I think Genesis's confidence was, really restored by that,
You mentioned the visual aspect of rock music being appealing to you. I should mention that you are professionally a designer.
Yes. So that was one of the reasons, that I got into it, because I knew that I wanted to be an artist of some sort. But, at that time, you're being groomed by your parents and your family and all this stuff. It's like, well, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to, you're going to be a fireman? You're going to be a policeman like your dad? Like, I don't think so. I wanted to do something productive, right? But I didn't really feel like I could be a painter or something like that. I think I needed something a little more work oriented, and graphic design just kind of turned into that thing. But it was very much a result of being told all through my youth, when I'd be sitting there drawing pictures of rock bands and all this kind of stuff, people would say to me, you should make album covers. And I never thought it would be that simple of a thing, but that's exactly what ended up happening.
The imagery for rock music and specifically like punk and metal is such a strong component of, even if you go the other way and have like anti imagery. I remember there was a period where every hardcore album was just like, a flat color, a blocky sans serif, and black and white photo. Do you know what I mean? But even that kind of became its own,
Yeah.
yeah, its own form of like, I don't want to say marketing, but like you see that and you know exactly what kind of music you're going to get.
Yeah. And what I find fascinating about that, in current times is that as I get older and I see more and more proof that pop does eat itself. And so culture is just consumed and regurgitated in a new form constantly. And so what I find fascinating about all those old hardcore records too is how new bands are appropriating that style. But it means something a little bit different now, because it's more of a style appropriation than it is the authentic nature of it. I mean, the flat colors and all that stuff had a lot to do with budget.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm kind of on the other side of the tracks in terms of being a metalhead, and it's funny because there was this real like pushback against the airbrushed album covers and the fantasy art and stuff like that, and maybe 15 years ago, maybe even more, I would notice teenagers, and sometimes quite young as well, like just starting high school, wearing the same band shirts that I wore in high school in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then it became this whole like revival thing where, new bands were pursuing the old illustrators who did all those like 80s album covers.
Yeah. I mean, Raymond Pettibon was, an artist in his own right, but it's like, but now, it's incredible. You think like, he gets paid really well to do his work, and his work is wonderful. I do find it really fascinating present day working with like a really varied roster of artists on album artwork. Billy Joel being one of my, primary clients, just didn't seem like it would be a fit, right, with somebody like me, but it totally works, And then you just sort of slide right across the scale to somebody like Diamanda Galas, who I've been working with for almost the last 5 years making album covers, and it's been extraordinary, sort of being able to have these tools of computers now and these sort of endless possibilities where you can really, really kind of capture what's in someone's imagination.
So I'd like to jump ahead to Scorpion Tea.
Sure.
Sorry, no pun intended. But tell me about the genesis of the band. What brought you guys together, and what were your intentions?
You could have also said spill the tea. So the intentions of Scorpion Tea, I had sort of been holding on to that name for a project for a bit, as I'm sure many people have, because it's the genesis of the name itself comes from Gibby Haynes of the Butthole Surfers. And in the short film Entering Texas that they made in the late 80s, a family arrives at this wayward, scary road in Texas where it says family style barbecue. And there's Gibby Haynes to greet these guests, masturbates into a frying pan, pours it into a cup, and serves Scorpion Tea in Texas. I just always thought that was so hilarious and weird and bizarre that it's like, wouldn't it be great to call a band Scorpion Tea? And after Genesis, it was the pandemic. There were so many things going on that were preventing people from getting together or moving forward in, things that they wanted to do. And an old buddy of mine had a knee surgery. He's from Colombia. And we just, been always been good friends or whatever. And he's like, anyway, I'm working on a record. Do you want to come to Colombia and record drums on it? And I checked the flight prices, couldn't believe my luck that I found a round trip flight for $400. And I was like, I'm going to Colombia. And while I was there, we worked on some music. And then he played me a lot of demos that he had been working on over the years. And I said, damn, this is really what I'd like to be doing musically right now, to kind of take this and really run with it and make something that just sounds broken and like otherworldly. And he was willing to move back from Colombia to do that. And so there it began. And within a couple of months, we were in pre-production and flying out to LA to make this record.
And we should say that Chris Cruz is the friend that you mentioned, who's living in Colombia. But you described the music that he created as broken and otherworldly.
Because there was something about the tones and the note choices and structures that just, they felt familiar but unfamiliar. Because he would do things like, in lieu of having a bass guitar on these demos, he would lay down the bass with an acoustic guitar detuned. And so even though it was like pretty much in tune, there was frequencies there that just caused it to sound broken or like just unusual, not the usual fare. So while the chord progressions and they maybe seem totally normal, they had this other kind of feel to them. And so I said to Chris, I said, do you want to kind of like go further with this? It's like, I really want to record to tape. I really want to be able to manipulate these sounds, and just have like a grand gesture, and he was totally, behind me the whole way on that. And the studio we ended up working with in Los Angeles, which is run by Thomas Dolas from a band called OCs, who are doing really well at the moment. It was all about tape and it was all about outboard effects, and so we got to really kind of get in there with the grit and what we like to call kind of making things crispy around the edges.
Yeah, the production of the album, and we can talk about working with Thomas Dolas in a little bit, but the production of the album is interesting because it's not necessarily a retro or throwback style, but it is very much, the word repudiation came up on this podcast a few weeks ago, and so for some reason that stuck in my head. But it is like a repudiation of some of the slicker, recording and production techniques that you're hearing on a lot of post-punk and death rock style albums.
Yeah, it was, I think that we went to that studio sight unseen. I mean, that backstory is a little bit crazy because I had been working with another label and I was committed to self-funding to get a record out. And so the deal was sort of struck with Thomas at Studio 22 in LA. And then during that, I sort of moved away from that label and decided to go with a different label. So Thomas and I had never met before. He had only heard the demos a couple of times. So it was really sight unseen. And we had, 6 or 7 days to really do it. And we just spent 14 to 16 a day in that studio, just experimenting. And then spent a good 2 months, over the course of 2 months mixing remotely. So I would say about the sound that, that they were able to help create has a lot to do with, Thomas and his studio engineer, Juju Ashworth. They're really young. And it was like, wow, it fascinates me that they're so young. They understand tape and outboard effects so well. But I think that's also why it didn't have like a typical sound in a way, because it's not the type of sound that they're used to producing at that studio. So there was sort of like some really great accidents that were also able to happen.
So did you guys actually record to tape?
We did, yes. And then all of that was bounced digitally. So yeah, I mean, that I was very sort of hell bent on having the warmth of tape.
As you mentioned, this project started with you and Chris in Columbia working on music, and then Chris, I believe you said, moved back to New York so that you could continue working.
Yes, and the one thing about me working, with you on these songs is that it comes with, it's going to come with a vocalist, and that vocalist is Anthony Diaz, who I had met a few times. We had jammed a few times together. Always liked Anthony. I was like, oh, that friend of yours. Yeah, sure, that sounds great. I like his voice and everything. So it was pretty much set. Once Chris arrived in New York, we kind of rolled right into rehearsing. And it was a pretty seamless transition.
So between your time in Columbia and your time rehearsing with Chris in New York, how complete were the songs?
It was 4 songs that Chris had that we agreed that we were going to utilize. And I said, I really feel like we need to go to the studio with 12. So over the course of several weeks, he wrote the rest. That is the genius of him, is that he's very prolific. And when he gets inspired, you usually don't just get one song, you usually get several. So that's a great advantage to working with him. And with Anthony, you get this incredibly educated person who just has a really, really strong way with words and is able to deliver a lyric that just sticks with you, as far as I'm concerned. And so in a way, he's been amongst the most interesting lyricists I've ever worked with, because there's always something that stuns me when I read it.
Gotcha. So 12 songs completed before you started working with Thomas?
We had 11 songs in the bag.
Okay.
The 12th one was written in the studio. And that's still unclear as to where that's going to go, because it sort of falls between a Scorpion T and an Edley ODowd track. So I'm not sure if it's going to go with Scorpion T or if it'll be on my next solo record.
You talked about working at Studio 22 with Thomas Dolas, and you also mentioned that Thomas is having a moment. His band, the OCs, is quite popular right now.
Yeah.
But why was Thomas the guy to do this?
Because Thomas was introduced to me by the former label I had been working with, by the guy who was running that. They're old friends from LA. And so it was just this kind of I'm going to put you in touch with my friend Thomas. Didn't know about OCs, didn't know about his amazing band, Mr. Elevator and the Brain Hotel, who I'm now a huge fan of. So yeah, like I said, kind of sight unseen, there was no deliberate connection with OCs or anything like that.
Right. The label put you in touch, but were you convinced that this young guy was going to understand where you guys were coming from?
I didn't know his age or anything about him until I met him in person.
Okay.
We had 2 phone calls and maybe 5 emails where I uploaded demos, said this is what we want to do, et cetera, et cetera. So I realized that I was taking this enormous chance. I mean, not only was I funding it, but I was also, paying for my band to get on the plane and go. And I was just kind of holy crap, I hope this doesn't be really bomb on me, it doesn't turn out bad or something. And it went quite the opposite.
Right. We spoke a little bit about the process of recording the album. Would you describe the sound as consciously retro, given that you were recording to tape?
Well, I guess if we're talking, are we talking about sound, the overall feel of it, or are we talking about the sound itself, the Scorpion T sound?
Well, let's take that in 2 parts. Would you say that Scorpion T's music is a throwback to maybe an older style?
I think that there's elements of older style, but like I said before about Pop Will Eat Itself, right? That the idea of taking these older styles, assume and regurgitating in new ways. So it's not. It doesn't go over my head that there's things on this record that sound a lot like Christian Death, but those are moments rather than something that I don't feel that we're aping anybody.
Right.
We're sort of taking the things that we love and kind of putting them in a blender. Because you'll also find on the record too, there's stuff that brought from Latin America. There's reggaeton influences and but just in little glimpses rather than kind of like laden with them. So in talking about Scorpion Tea, it's like the influences that are in it are so varied. And I was saying, earlier that it doesn't go over my head that there are, moments where it'll really sound like Christian Death, or somebody will say, "Oh, I really hear Killing Joke in this." Sometimes it's deliberate, and a lot of times it's not, because what ends up happening, or what I felt has happened with me being the age that I am, having lived all this goth and post-punk the first time, I'm really coming from that place. And Chris and Anthony are significantly younger, and they're kind of coming from a different place where they didn't grow up with the same music that I did. And so the combination becomes then what I consider to be something kind of unique, because it's not driven by one thing,
Now, as far as the production of the album, we spoke about recording to tape, which is almost obsolete now in terms of recording. Would you say that the sound of the album is a throwback in any regard?
No, I think that the idea of using tape was really more about being able to create an atmosphere, and not that it would necessarily be vintage, but my ears are sort of attuned a little bit to the sharpness of digital and how grating it can be. And I feel with tape, there's a lot more air, and it kind of creates a space that you can walk through. And I feel like that was also very integral for Anthony and his lyrics, because there's storytelling and there's different voices being used, and having the warmth of tape and this ability to create an atmosphere, I felt really benefited him in his delivery.
So the album is coming out through Give Take. Tell me about the label, because I've never heard of them before now.
Yeah, to be honest, I hadn't heard of them before either, and it was through this publicist that I work with, and Scorpion T was, I think I had just come back from LA from the initial recording, and so I was talking to him, and I was like, I think this record's going to be fantastic. Like, who do you think should put it out? Because in the past, I like with Psychic TV, I had started my own label, and so I was kind of in control of all of that. Never really had to think about anybody to put something out other than distribution. So my publicist actually brought up the idea of Give Take, and he said he had worked with them before and that they had never really had a rock band. And so I thought this would be an interesting opportunity to see how a label that maybe kind of deals with goth and like that sort of thing from more of an electronic perspective, what would happen if they handled it from a rock perspective. And so it's been really fun on all accounts because both the band and the label have been super open to kind of like, let's just create. And so they've been, I kind of feel like it's very much it's sort of a mix of all the parts, label and band.
I mean, somehow the publicist for an electronic label handled a goth rock band, and you guys ended up on a death metal podcast.
But the thing, but Chris and Anthony, they don't know about this interview yet, but death metal podcast, they are going to be so stoked. Because those guys, the two of them, they've worked together for 20 years as like songwriter, lyricist, and there's a whole death metal project that they've done that we're actually considering revisiting and laying new drums on with me. But yeah, so they're going to be super psyched that I'm speaking with you.
Hopefully they'll like this interview and we can speak some more about it.
Yeah.
So by the time people hear this episode, Scorpion T's self-titled debut will be out by Give Take. Edley, what's the best way to get the album?
Well, once the album's out, because the album's available for pre-order now through give.take.life. That is the URL you follow. From there, it will take you to Bandcamp or Amazon or Apple or whatever, wherever it is you choose to buy your music, whether it's digital or pre-ordering the LP. After the 27th, once the album's out, it will be available through, again, give.take.life and in many record stores as well. And if you're listening overseas, you can go through Rough Trade or your local distributors and ask for it, because it does have distribution. We do have some worldwide distribution going on.
Tell me about the physical formats that Give Take is putting out.
Physical formats that Give Take is putting out is vinyl with a beautifully foil stamped cover. I really wanted to make this, design this packaging to be kind of epic, and it's simple, but it's got this kind of timelessness to it as well that I really like. So there's going to be the LP that's coming out on random colored vinyl. So you order a copy and you won't know what color you get until you open it, as well as something called a Dig Your Own Grave Pass, which is a small coffin that houses a credit card style download card. And if you've been with us on this journey the whole time, you would be getting fed brand new singles and videos to your card, every month or so. And so like a constant rolling out of content. So those are the two physical products that Give Take has put out.
So the Dig Your Own Grave Pass is different from a subscription or a Patreon or anything like that, because it's a one-time purchase, but you get constant new content. Is that correct?
Yes, up until the release of the album. So
I see, okay.
The pass doesn't get you the album itself, but rather singles and the videos that are released, as well as other content that wasn't available anywhere else. So over the winter, I was recording us in rehearsal rooms and editing that stuff, also that people with the pass could see our progression.
So just because I feel like making record collectors crazy, tell me more about the random colors for the vinyl. How many they're limited to and what their chances are of getting all of them.
I wouldn't be able to say, because what's interesting about the random color process is that back with Psychic TV, when I was running our label Angry Love Productions, because I was actually in the driver's seat of having things manufactured, and then I was also packaging them as well. So I would get these boxes of records, open them up, and you'd see this mouth-watering array of color combinations. With Scorpion T, I didn't have that advantage. So I'm only seeing the colors that were, on like copies of the vinyl that were open. So there's hundreds where we don't know what the color is going to be, which I think is
So basically you're saying eBay.
right. But with the Psychic TV thing, because like I said about manufacturing that vinyl, and like I knew how many variables, and people started to catch on how many variables there were. People would order 10 copies at a time. The real hardcore collectors would literally order 10 copies. And I'm like, I love that. I don't like the post retail that can happen. You know what I mean? Because I also don't think that's fair, but it is what it is. But it was always really encouraging, to get these correspondences with people wanting like every possible mutation.
We spoke about the soul album Forward that you put out at the beginning of the year. Do you have any more music planned for that?
I do. I'm currently working. I've been working sort of on the side all year, for short periods at a time, just sort of collecting material, spend a few days editing and just keep things moving along. But with my solo work, I've decided to take a step in another direction and start working with vocalists. And I'm seeing some really, really amazing results that I'm looking forward to sharing with the world. Hard to say what the end result is going to be like in terms of an album vibe, but it's definitely quite different from what I did on Forward.
Very cool. If people want to follow you online, either your visual artwork or your music, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to follow me is Edley, Edley ODowd, ODowd, and that name is used on all social media platforms. To follow Scorpion T, we are on all socials as Scorpion T Time, because Scorpion T was taken. So you just have to add that TIME at the end, and you'll find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's good. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Shallow the pulse, but shadow dismay the same. I'm distorted in the flesh shattered. Phantom of shame, it's all you can give to get there. To revere, to venerate, to acquiesce, capitulate, dismissal, dismissing, dismissing, dismissing. Dismissing. Blink once, you'll listen. I'm distorted in the Fake X-Men.